everybody. Welcome back. Doc Mad Diet Podcast, episode 21. Very excited about today's guest, Brian Sanders. He is the host of the Peak Human podcast, where he's interviewed pretty much every big name in the food, health, and nutrition world the past 4 to 5 years. He's also the director of the upcoming film Food Lies, a documentary coming out talking about basically what our ideal diet should be as humans, as Homo sapiens. Where have we gone wrong in this country in terms of dietary guidelines, and what can we do on an individual level to fix that? And also what I love about Brian is check him out at nosetail.org, where he sells animal-based products, and he actually gets to know the individual farmers and know where the food is coming from. So once again, check that out. That is nosetail.org. And one thing I especially love about Brian is his open-minded approach. I don't think he got into this originally intending to get into this space. You were once you studied at UCLA, you're mechanical engineering, isn't that right?
Yeah, it's a lot different.
So what brought you into this space?
Well, yeah, I kind of had to find my health. It's something that a lot of people have to do, especially when they turn 30.
Yeah.
For some reason, that's a magical year where it's just like, oh man, I can't eat whatever I want anymore. And I always stayed active and all that, but it was, my health was catching up to me despite the fact that I was active, right? Which is part of the story. And then my parents actually, I lost both of them around the same time to these chronic diseases. So that's so common these days that, we think this stuff is normal, right? It's like, well, you just get older, you get fatter, you get on medications, and then you slowly wither away, which is insane, right? It's insane. And it doesn't have to be like that. And I feel like modern society just sets people up to think like that that's how it goes, right? All the media, all the pharmaceutical ads, like everything that, the standard healthcare system, it just pushes all of that narrative. And it's like, you don't have to be that way at all. You don't have to, you're not genetically doomed. I'm not genetically doomed to get cancer or Alzheimer's just because my parents did. You have a lot more control. You have power. It's just an empowering message that people need to hear. So that's why I got out of the engineering world. Actually, I was more in the tech world by then.
Okay.
Just completely changed paths, quit my job, just went off into this nutrition world with unknown outcomes, right? Just making this film and it all kind of just happened from there.
Yeah, you dove in head first. And what's great is you didn't have any preconceived notions heading in. You were just rejecting the normalization of degeneration and eventual disease. And you're like, there's gotta be something better out there. So you really looked at it from an unbiased perspective, which is why I think your message is so valuable.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem is that everyone goes into a camp, it seems like, and it's either that you go into some nutrition camps like, oh, I'm vegan. And then you identify as the vegan guy or something, or you're not in, I guess you could say, indoctrinated into a certain viewpoint. If you're, say, part of the regular medical system and you go to all the schooling for how long? And I have a lot of doctor friends, they're either DOs or MDs, and they've been brainwashed. They either still are, or they've come out of it, and they tell me that they were. You know what I mean? They bought into the system. Yep. And so if you're coming at it from an outside approach, sometimes then you don't get bought into certain things.
Yeah, you don't have a dog in the race, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see that a lot too. And some of my friends are medical doctors, DOs, and a lot of the younger ones are starting to catch on to the old indoctrination styles they've been led into. I mean, medical doctors barely get any nutritional education throughout school, which is quite literally killing people. So I think the wave is changing, and I think it's conversations like this that are help pushing that wave through.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know thousands of people, there's probably hundreds of thousands of people online that just have made amazing changes just based on the right information.
So you mentioned it was your health problems that led you to create all this. What did you find worked best for you?
Yeah, I made simple changes. Like I said, I wasn't obese or anything, and I didn't have debilitating problems, but I was just like the normal 30-year-old that had like a 32-inch waist. Which is big for me because now I'm a 28-inch waist.
Right.
So I dropped 4 pant sizes. Maybe It's more like 3 because who knows what the different sizes of different pants. But I had allergies, I had joint pain, I had acid reflux, sort of indigestion. I had all these types of things, and I thought that was normal. And I was, just like, oh, well, I can't play sports anymore because my knees are bad. All these type of things you hear everywhere, right? It's like, oh, of course, yeah, I'm on the medication. I got all the acid reflux, and I get heartburn every time I eat. I haven't had heartburn in like 5 years. It's like it's just what you're eating. It's so simple.
Right.
And man, I wish people knew more about this stuff. But so many problems. Some people can at least connect the heartburn to the food, right? That's kind of obvious. People are like, oh yeah, you eat nachos and you get heartburn. I'm like, yeah, you're eating these chips fried in seed oils and like a bunch of fake cheese, of course. But they don't connect it. They just think, oh, okay, whatever.
It's
they don't
just
realize
my time. It's my time to deal with it, and they accept it and take a medication, and they can't, have the proper stomach acid and so on and so forth, which creates more problems. But yeah, back to your point of it's not normal to have to deal with these things.
But okay, so then it goes beyond that. So then that was the easy one, right? The indigestion, food, people get it. What I found, and what all the doctors and scientists I interview have found, is that it goes so much beyond that. All of these modern problems, right? That's what I said. Even allergies, people think, oh yeah, allergies is just what, yeah, you live in a place with bad allergies. That's not how it really works. It's like if your immune system's constantly down because you're eating all the refined grains and there's all these different things going on in your diet, with the processed foods, then yes, you can have allergies. And yes, I've had allergies come back if I go on trips and I start eating
Go off the
some
diet.
bad foods, right? And then and it's not because I'm in some different location, because when I come back to my home location, that's when the allergies can come, right? It's not, I'm not, I understand that, yes, if I go into some other area, there's different allergens. No, I'm talking about in my same hometown, because I ate bad food, my immune system's down, and now the allergies flare up.
Yeah. And I try to tell my patients all the time that the way their body is feeling, obviously, as a chiropractor, I could help alleviate their pains. But when it comes to low-grade systemic inflammation, until they change their diets and remove these processed foods, and the big one is definitely grains, some people dairy, some people soy, depending on what really inflames you, I can adjust you 1,000 times a year, and you're still going to almost be in the same spot until we really change the root problem. But just getting people to think that how you eat impacts how you feel, that's a leap right there. That's hard enough. And that's where we got to start sometimes.
100%. And that's why I'm making the film.
Yep. So let's talk more about the film. So what led you to the film production? Without giving too much away,
I'll give it away. We need to give it away because people are still going to see it. I could give away the whole film, but man, once you see it, it's going to be awesome. It's way better. Yeah. So yeah, I saw What the Health. I think that was the big, really turning point for me, is 4 years ago. I saw it. I forced myself to watch it. It's this vegan film, total bogus information. People should understand these people are just animal rights activists with the agendas, trying to change your mind with fakery and all these,
propaganda,
misleading, science, propaganda. Exactly. So I realized something had to be done. So yeah, I had a film kind of background growing up. So I just decided to do it, started interviewing top doctors and scientists around the world. And it's been a long, slow process, but we're in post-production, we're in the final stages here.
Okay.
We've been around the world, been around the North America, and it's going to be so good. Yeah. I went to Africa recently to live and hunt with hunter-gatherers and see how people are, still living healthy and still, it was actually interesting. Speaking of all the problems that people think are normal, we asked them, it's like, hey, do you have back pain? Like, what are you talking about? It's like, do you have trouble sleeping at night? What are you talking about? Do you have problems with menstruation or around pregnancy or anything? They're like, absolutely not. What are you talking about?
Unheard of, yes.
They didn't, they couldn't figure out what we were talking about. Like joint pain. They're like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, like this guy fell out of a tree once and his back hurt. Is that what you're talking about? Like, no. You falling out of a tree is not back pain. That's an acute injury.
Right.
So they really have no idea what we're talking about. They live long, they live well, and yeah, they die of different things.
Right. They die of things that, modern society, for all its woes, has helped with, like infections and, things like that, viruses that help stop the spread, communicable diseases. But we didn't see even dental issues. I mean, we didn't see all this crowding of the teeth and all these different heart disease problems before the advent of agriculture. So spending time with those indigenous peoples really can illuminate you into how we're supposed to live.
Absolutely. And that sounds like some Weston A. Price stuff that we could cover. I don't know if you covered him a lot, but I just think it's really great for people to know about him. For the book Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, he went around the world in the 1930s, back when there were still populations living with the actual native practices and not having the modern foods. And he found, yes, they had perfect dental health, near perfect dental health, like way different from the US. This guy was in Ohio. He's a dentist in the 30s and saw all these messed up teeth and crowding. It's like, what is wrong with this? Doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so all the populations he looked at around the world, they all were completely separated, had no contact with each other, but they all had the same practices, especially around pregnancy and eating the nutrient dense animal foods and embracing fat and organ meats and eggs and fish and eating the whole animal, nose to tail, and all this stuff. And they all figured this out independently. And they all were very healthy, and they all lost their health as soon as the modern processed ingredients came in: sugar, flour, and the oil.
Yep. When all that changed, the health went away. Yeah. Whenever somebody's confused about how they should eat, I just tell them to look at everything from an evolutionary perspective, and does it make sense through that lens or not? And that's kind of should be your guiding principle.
100%.
So talk more about your nose to tail company. What are we doing there?
Well, yeah. So I got really into regenerative agriculture. I'm like, yeah, we're not doing things correctly right now. But it's interesting that the vegans will say, okay, so we have some problems with industrialization of all agriculture, including animal agriculture and feedlots. So we should just not eat animals, which is absurd. It's an absurd thought. And they conveniently skipped a solution, which is raising animals better. Right. And so that's what I'm all about. And so I learned about that for many years after, well, you see, I started my journey 8 years ago. So 2.5 years ago, I started Nose to Tail. And it was just an idea to help regenerative agriculture get directly to their consumers, right? It's like people who are doing things right, instead of going through the system. I'm really against centralized food systems in general, right? That's how we got in this mess. And we talk about all the processed food companies and all this mess we're in, even with logistics issues in the last year and a half and, supply chain issues. There's so many things going on. The solution is to go direct to your rancher and get food direct to your farmer. Go to your farmer's market. If you can't go to your farmer's market, that's why I started Nose to Tail, was to try to aggregate people, good ranchers doing things right. And really, it is only just one family per animal. It's not like we have a huge network yet.
Right.
So I really know who these people are. Like, if you go and look at the videos that we have, it's like, that's the animals that you're getting. Like, this is just, these are, each family raises one animal, and then we have a processor and we get it straight to you. So I think that's the future.
Could you explain to my listeners what exactly regenerative agriculture actually is?
Yeah, I think the simple way I explain it is there's 3 kind of levels, right? There's the first level is all cows. Well, all cows spend 2/3 of their life on grass. There's a cow-calf operation. Vegans will tell you, I just saw a vegan meme today. Someone sent me. It says they're locked up in a cage their whole life. This is an absurd thought. The cow-calf operation, the baby cow has to be with its mother on pasture for the first 2/3 of their life. That's just how it works. Then, yes, most of them go to feedlots. So the first category, we'll call it, of the 3 tiers, is just that. It goes to the feedlot, they're finished off quickly, fatten up, and then you go to the grocery store and get it. Then the next level would be grass-fed, grass-finished. You can find stuff like this at Whole Foods and other places, so it's a bit better, right? There's still some loopholes, and it's not all cut and dry, but it's better, right? They eat their natural diet their whole life. Third level would be regenerative, which is actually taking care of the lands and raising them in a way that is actively helping the soil, helping them, the animals, and the whole ecosystem. So it's called holistic management. Okay. There's Alan Savory. You could look up a great TED Talk that he did, a very famous TED Talk. Alan Savory's great. And he's been trying to do this around the world, holistic management. And then there's something called rotational grazing, which is a simple way to think of how they mimic the ancestral version of how ruminants worked and bison on the plain, right? They moved around. And so they didn't overgraze one patch of land. They were moved by predators, and they had to move around, and they would stimulate the soil with their mouths, even their saliva, eating it the correct, the right amount. their manure, urine, even all of these things, fed back into the soil, stimulated growth, fed the root structure, all this stuff, so that the soil could actually sequester carbon. If we're talking about carbon, if you want to talk about CO2, well, we can get it back in the soil through these practices, because the cows, help this process. They put carbon back in the soil. And so, yeah, that's the good way to do it.
But basically, the way I think of regenerative agriculture and this rotational feeding is you pretty much have a plot of land. Imagine it's divided into four, right? They pretty much start in like the upper left corner, and then they move upper right and then down. And as they're moving, they're eating and they're fertilizing. And by the time they get back around, that grass is regrown. And this cycle can hypothetically be repeated ad infinitum. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's a great way to think about it. And it's all about the timing too. Yeah, you want to hit that perfect point of it's like a cost benefit analysis, or you can imagine just an X. And it's like when the grass grows a certain height, it's like the height of the nutrition and the height of the right growth. You don't want to let it grow too long or too short. The most nutrition even in that grass, when it's at the teenage years, Joel Salatin calls it, right in that spot, you get them, move around, come back, and it's grown up again.
And it's in the right spot. So if you time it correctly, you're at that height, like you just said, for the peak grass years.
Yep. And it's better for everyone, better for the soil, better for the animal, better for even the nutrition of the meat. It's all there. And also there's even the diversity of the rangelands is important. And especially nose to tail, we do it in West Texas, and the land needs regenerating for one thing. And also there's a whole bunch of different species of grasses and forages and legumes and all types of stuff that go on, right? So that's even better. That's why this is the third level. Yeah, I mean, you could be grass fed and just be like on a monocrop of grass, which isn't necessarily ideal. And I've interviewed guys like Dr. Stefan van Vliet that get into the metabolomics, and he looks at these 70,000 secondary compounds that we can now look at through mass spectrometry. I always get that wrong. And we can see what all these other compounds are in meat. And if they're feeding on these diverse pastures, they have more of these compounds in their meat, and they even have phytonutrients in meat, which is really interesting, because people always think of that as just, oh, you have to eat a bunch of kale.
Right. Not true. So what are some of the biggest obstacles to adapting this regenerative agriculture nationwide?
Well, yeah, I've been talking to people for many years about this. There's a guy, Gabe Brown. I did an interview with him on my podcast, Peak Human. He's one of the OG guys in the space doing things at a large scale. He had a 5,000 acre farm and ranch, and he's basically been doing this for about a decade. He's kind of forced to do it because so many hailstorms, and he just lost all this money. And he basically like, there's got to be a better system than just doing this industrial monocrop thing, and you get the subsidized corn, wheat, and soy, and this and that, and then you raise the cows separately. It's like, why would we do this? Like, we can use animals and plants working together. And he uses things like cover crops, and you don't want to have the soil bare, right? He has cover crops that grow on the land instead of just leaving them fallow. Like you've driven by and you've seen these like empty fields. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're never supposed to have the soil bare. That's how you ruin soil. That's how you bake it to death and kill all the microorganisms. These cover crops, and then the ruminant animals, such as cows and beef and steers, can go and eat all that, right? That there's a big buffet of food, and you don't want to use till. There's called no-till farming, where you do not dig up the soil. That's how you screw it all up. You can plant the seeds in a very unobtrusive way. And so basically he's taught me a lot about this, other people as well, but this is, the way it works. You can do this sustainably and monetarily, it works. But the problem is you can't get loans to do it. So and I never thought about this side too. It's like everything is set up in a system where you have to do the subsidized corn, wheat, and soy. You got to do the feedlots. You got to do things the way the government tells you.
Farmers really have no options.
You have no option. They won't give you a loan. So it's like, oh, so why can't they do it? Like, well, they can't get a loan. You go to the bank. They're like, I need like 50 grand to do this. And farmers, they don't have money sitting around, right? They need the loans to like make the operation work. And they said, you're going to do this wacky thing with no-till and cover crops and rotational grazing. They're like, what is that? So you can't have a loan. You're not spraying chemicals on everything and doing all your stupid, government subsidy stuff. Sorry.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So how can we help with this regenerative agriculture movement? What are some of the ways we can help propulse this into being accepted and help these farmers get loans?
Well, yeah. So actually, he taught me some more. Actually,
Okay.
he was telling me even years ago that big companies that he couldn't name were consulting with him. Big companies paying him because guess what? Big companies do. They go after money.
They follow the
They
money.
go where the market goes.
Mm-hmm.
They go where the market goes. Very important, and they go after money.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to get in on this regenerative ag thing, which is a good thing. And why? Because consumers are buying regenerative ag products. They're buying grass-fed, grass-finished things. They're looking for labels that say, organic, grass-fed, beef. And so these big companies are smart. So now I hope that they're going to do things well. I mean, there's always like weird loopholes and workarounds people try to do, but I think generally it's a good thing if you get big money to invest in these things, and then they will do things on a better level because they know consumers want it.
Right. So we have, at least through the power of our dollar, voting through our dollar, have gotten their attention at this point.
100%. And it does work, but then that's the big level. You can also do it on the small level, and you just support your local ranchers directly. So yeah, also I would say go to your farmers markets and just buy from people there. I do that here in Austin. I don't always, like use my own company, and I don't always promote my own company because I always say, go to your local ranchers. It's even better.
Right.
Yeah. So I know my ranchers around here in Austin, and I visited them actually. I go out and I drive out east, and I see what's going on, and I get to know them, and it's great. And yeah, people should do that. That's the best way.
Okay. So what do you say to somebody who they're vegetarian or vegan, and they're doing it because they feel like meat production is bad for the planet? Now, what would be, and you're in the elevator with them, and you only have, a minute or two to really try and change their mind, probably an uphill battle, but what would you say?
Oh, I've changed someone's mind. This vegetarian was at my house that I didn't really know in LA.
Okay.
We talked for 45 minutes and she went and got a steak.
Wow. All right.
Yeah,
I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation.
Oh man. Okay. So there's three major arguments when people talk about plant-based and stuff. They say it's better morally, it's better for the environment, and it's better nutritionally.
Yep.
And I would say, yeah, if I had a minute, I could break down each of those. On the highest level, morally, more animals die producing plants, actually. When you're doing monocrop, these big industrial systems, more animals die. Nutritionally, I'll go into either, but if I had just the 30-second version.
Well, no,
nutritionally,
we got time, but off.
Well, no, I could go into each one. Yeah, I'll go into each one, but just, yeah. So nutritionally, we've been eating meat for all of history. The new foods have come in, the processed foods, the sugar and the flour and the oil have come in the last 100 years, and that's when diseases started. Yep. So on the highest level, why are people blaming food that we've eaten, animal foods, eggs, meat, fish, for all of history, and everyone's fine? And then what changed? The new sugar, flour, oil came in, all the processed foods are made of these. That's when disease happened. So your theory is dead in the water from the beginning. It wasn't animal foods. And environmentally, again, animals have been on grass for all of time. They co-evolved on grasslands. Grasslands existed because of bison and other animals, and bison existed because of grasslands. This is how the world works. So there was actually more animals. If you look at even just the weight of all the megafauna and all the animals that have been on Earth and ruminant animals that have been eating grass, there's way more throughout history than there are today. Even with all of our factory farms, there still are more back in the day. So they are not the problem. It's fossil fuel, airplanes, jets, industry, coal, everything else but the cow. So those three arguments are dead in the water from the get-go. And then yes, we can go into each one if you'd like.
So the moral one, I mean, plants are living things too, last time I checked.
That's another one. Yeah, I like there's new science coming out about how they can feel things, that they communicate, that they even make sounds, or there's little communication methods in plants. So there's a lot going on there. I don't even like that one because, there is somewhat of a hierarchy, and I guess humans have to eat something. But I like the arguments more about how many animals have to die to create plant foods, and that if you don't recognize this, you're basically just sticking your head in the sand. It's always the vegan people who say this are always the people least connected with how food is grown. They're the people in the cities, that don't understand.
Then how many animals do need to die in order to create plant-based products?
Well, it's hard to say. There's one study that was, man, I don't want to get this wrong. It was like maybe 100 times more mice it was out of Australia. So this was just one study in one place, but the amount of just field mice that had to die to get a certain amount of food, when you compared a cow to the wheat, it was 100x more deaths from the wheat, because you have to destroy entire ecosystems to grow big plots of monocropped wheat, right? Or any of the plant foods that people subsist on these diets. So you're destroying ecosystems. So it's actually before, during, and after is when the animals die. So before, you destroy entire ecosystems and displace animals, kill them in the process,
right?
All kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then during, people probably have heard of how many animals are chopped up in the combines. When you see these giant pieces of equipment plowing through all these fields of corn, wheat, and soy, they chop up just ground nesting squirrels and birds, ground nesting birds, squirrels, baby deer, mice, baby animals of all kinds get chopped up. Then after, this is a new one that I heard about too, is that's all their food source. You just took away their whole food source by harvesting the field. Now, this Australian farmer let me in on all this info. They are starving to death. Now there are millions of animals that, on giant, thousands of acres of fields that are starving to death now because they have no more food source. So now we have all kinds of little baby deer, cute little Bambi, starving to death just so you can get your corn and wheat and soy and whatever.
Right.
But if you're the opposite of that, the best version of the opposite would be a regeneratively raised cow. And that's the only animal that theoretically would have to die. Right? Because if it's just eating forage and grass and whatever it can get a hold of, there should be no deaths. And that could feed, hundreds of people.
And not to mention even the bioavailability of animal meat's protein compared to plant-based protein. The bioavailability, so the amount of food you need to eat in order to sustain a proper diet with proper protein absorption is magnification is larger too for a plant-based operation.
It's a really good point. And luckily there is one study I've seen that shows this, because a lot of the plant-based advocates say that you can get more calories, from just eating the plants directly, which is such a stupid argument. Like, we don't need more calories. People are obese and malnourished at the same time.
Right.
What we need is more higher quality food. And so the study showed that when you actually do the calculations of the protein, which matters the most really in your diet, is you need to get this, the protein and nutrients, but usually the more high quality animal protein you get, it comes with all the good nutrients that are more bioavailable. So if you look at the protein that say a cow would eat over its lifetime, it actually doubles the amount of protein when you eat it, right? So it's like, of all the protein it eats, so it's taking low quality foods like grass, especially cellulose, stuff that humans can't eat.
Yeah, we're not rudiments. We don't have a digestive system.
We can't eat it.
Right.
So, and it's very low protein, or they eat, even if they're in a feedlot, they'll be eating leftover distiller's yeast, for making beer or something, or ethanol. Like, they have all the leftover corn parts that no one can use from making biofuels. And then the cows eat it. It's like this worthless, low protein food that humans can't eat. They eat it and they turn it into high quality bioavailable protein. And they actually double that amount on average over their life. So they upcycle protein, right? So this matters. So calories don't really matter when you're talking about health. We need to know what kind of bioavailable complete nutrition can we get.
Yep. I mean, there's obviously the camp that is all about calories in, calories out. And I get that camp. I understand what they're saying, because look, you can be eating a perfect paleo human diet, whatever you want to call it, but if you're overeating and you're not burning enough, then obviously, yes, you can still gain weight.
Yeah.
But it's way more than that. You got to look at the not all calories are created equal. You got to look at the content,
Well, yeah.
quality of those calories.
You could talk about this forever. Or like I get it. There's a doctor, or he's like a PhD that ate Twinkies and lost weight. Because yeah, he just ate like 1,000 calories of Twinkies and lost weight. Of course, no one's denying that. This is the stupidest thing. Of course, yeah. And he was miserable, had the worst diet ever.
Yeah,
was malnourished, was starving all the time. It's meaningless. It's so yes, it's all about the quality of calories that you eat, and different foods do different things in your body, and there's different bioavailabilities, different all this stuff. And really, yeah, what matters is protein and nutrients.
Yep.
So yes, you need to count protein and nutrients, not calories, basically.
Yep. I mean, sustainably, that guy can be on a Twinkie diet for a month or two, hell, maybe even a whole year. He can do that and get away with it. Probably not, but maybe. But after that, he's going to start to have some major health issues, regardless of calories.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, where did we go wrong in this country? I mean, was it the food pyramid? Was it the 6 to 11 servings of bread per day when that first food pyramid came out? Does it predate that? Do you have a certain turning point in your head where we went wrong in America?
Yeah, it's hard. There was a real strong uptick in obesity in 1980 when we did release a food pyramid, and you can kind of see it go droop and then droop, and it started going up steeply. I think it's a lot of things, really. I think I might even blame it on blaming animal foods. Like demonizing animal foods was a huge issue because, well, there's a cascade of things that happen if you demonize saturated fat and cholesterol, like what happens with Ansel Keys and the whole long story that we're going to go through in the film. Yep. If you believe that saturated fat and cholesterol are bad, then you believe that animal foods are bad. And then you start making up for those foods with 6 to 11 servings of grain, or with all these polyunsaturated fats from seed oils, which is a whole new problem. And yeah, so a lot of mistakes can be made once you, especially also if you think all calories are the same. Actually include that. If you think all calories are the same, so back in the day, we didn't even know that protein was different from other calories. So that's a huge thing. At least a lot of the calorie bros these days, they'll at least say, okay, well, as long as you equate for protein, as long as you're getting enough protein, then yes, calories may not matter as much from fat or carbs. And I agree, that's fine.
Yep.
But but back in the day, we didn't even know that protein calories were different from other calories. So if you think that animal fats are bad and animal foods are bad, and that all calories are the same, then you could just be like, okay, we'll just make low fat products and basically give a green light to the food industry and say, just make whatever garbage you want, put it in a package because, it's the same amount of calories. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Protein doesn't matter. So, there's a lot of big industry influence going on, big money, even on how those guidelines came to be, right? It's like there's a whole story. I don't want to get into all these details. The McGovern report, all kinds of stuff went on, and lobbying even with getting all the grains and the subsidized corn, wheat, soy in the food system. There's money. It's always about money, and
exactly.
Yeah.
So do you think, what's the bigger problem? Is it sugar? Because that's been pretty demonized recently. Obviously we had the Ansel Keys study that came out that definitely brought the lights on the problems there. But I've also heard you talk a lot recently about the polyunsaturated fats, the PUFAs. So explain why you think maybe the PUFAs are more of a big deal than the sugar.
Yeah, this is a really kind of hard topic to get into because it gets nuanced pretty quickly. Because I don't think people should be eating extra sugar, added sugar. And I don't think definitely people should be eating refined grains and all this stuff. But I also don't think people should be eating the seed oils. It's like all three of these are bad for multiple reasons. They're bad because I think they're pro-inflammatory in a lot of ways, especially in excess. Anything in excess is kind of bad, really, right? But I think
protein can be bad to a certain degree.
Excess water could be bad.
Right.
If you drink too much water, like you could die, or you could dilute
oxygen.
Excess oxygen. You could do, well, even water. You dilute all your minerals out. If you're just drinking like buckets of water each day, you're actually diluting minerals, really. So, they're unique. I think some of these things are uniquely bad though, right? That like I think refined grains, some of this, stuff like gluten or the polyunsaturated fats from vegetable oils, they're like uniquely bad. But generally, these things are what people cause them to overeat, and it's like, if we want to talk about calories, where are we getting these excess calories from? It's from the sugar, the flour, the oil, from the processed foods. So you can kind of, what I'm saying is that they're bad for two reasons. They're bad because people are eating too much of them for many reasons. Some people blame it on hyperpalatability. Some people, you can blame it on these fake flavorings and all this stuff that people put in them to make you overeat. Talk about the addictive nature. Yes, addictive nature. You could talk about, even blood sugar problems. You eat it, your blood sugar roller coaster. You become hungry because you eat these really highly refined foods. You could talk about all kinds of things of why people overeat them, and I get it and I agree. So, but then we want to talk about the seed oils specifically, otherwise known as vegetable oils, otherwise known as the PUFAs, well, especially the omega-6, otherwise known as linoleic acid. All these things, we're talking about these polyunsaturated fats that we usually have not eaten. Like for all the history, we were focused more on saturated fats and monounsaturated fats. And now all of a sudden, these smart characters, with these food agencies, decided that the polyunsaturated fats were the ones we should eat and we should avoid saturated fat. And I think that's where we really got screwed up. So it started, I think, with Crisco back in the early 1900s. And they had a bunch of cotton seed left over, and they were using it as actually a machine lubricant. They're like, hey, why don't we sell this to humans? So they had this like 16-step process to deodorize it and this and that and clean it. And then they, it's like the grossest thing ever. Then they made it into Crisco and tried to sell it to housewives as an alternative to butter. And it was like, oh, it's this clean thing. And, it's not like butter, like this gross, this is what your grandma used. And now we're modern, be modern, use our stuff. I think that's where our problems really started. Really, when you look back at why was there heart disease starting in the 1950s, which President Eisenhower had a heart attack, and this kind of spurred this whole Ansel Keys and the whole thing. This is when people were eating a whole bunch of fake oils in the beginning and using the Crisco and the spreads and all that, and they're smoking. They're smoking nonstop. People have seen that, right? They're smoking. The little babies in the back of the car, and the windows are up, and the parents are smoking, and the whole car's. It's insane. It's insane. So I think that's where the problem started. Again, people always just blamed it on the animal foods.
Right.
But the polyunsaturated fatty acids, so I don't know how deep you want to go, but they are unstable. They have these double bonds. They are able to be oxidized a lot easier than saturated fat or monounsaturated fat.
The oxidization eventually leads to inflammation.
They're very easily oxidized, yes, and this is this pro-inflammatory thing that happens especially when you heat them. And so where do the vegetable oils sit? They're in the fryers. We got all these fryers filled with these vegetable oils. It's really cheap, and so of course, all these fast food places use them, or any restaurant, they use them to cook with, on the pan, in the skillet top, on the fryer, all this stuff. And it's just oxidized, and they don't change them that often either. Highly oxidized. There's a whole bunch of rabbit holes you can go down on why they're bad, but they are just not what human cells are meant to be made up of. And this, I guess I'll do the quick overview. I like to always put it into the kind of an evolutionary context.
Right.
And so there's great doctors doing presentations on this that I've watched and I interviewed and all that. But if you look at the cultures around the world that are still eating their native diets, right? Like the Weston Price studied before, or even what he studied, they didn't have any of these oils. They didn't have the seed oils. They didn't have any foods that had a high amount of the omega-6 polyunsaturated fats, the PUFAs. So you could look at diets of, say, the Tokalauans or the Succinate. These are two good examples of we can still study them in the last, 50 years. And we looked at actually their tissues, their fat, we did biopsies and found they had very low PUFA. They had very low omega-6. And their diet was high carb, actually. This is what he alluded to, that maybe sugar is not the problem per se, like sugar, quote, sugar as in glucose, or, whole food carbohydrates could be fine. maybe they're not fine for most people in modern society because they have type 2 diabetes, and
they're combined with other things too, combined with these seed oils.
combined with these seed oils. Yeah. So again, maybe the carbs are getting thrown under the bus, just like meat has, because they're combined with the seed oils. But still, I always want to say it still is a good intervention to cut out carbs, because usually they're empty calories, usually they're refined, usually, you know what I mean? There's many reasons.
Most people, when we think of carbs, most people aren't just eating the sweet potatoes and fruits and starchy vegetables. They're eating pastries and danishes, donuts,
cereal, and all kinds of weird stuff.
Right.
So yes, there's a big difference. And well, what's great, excuse me, is that, I think it's a great intervention and a sort of a process to cut out carbs, get fat adapted. But what the great thing is, you can come back to them, get healthy, cut out all the PUFAs and omega-6. Then your body can handle some carbs. Then you're like, okay, yes, I'll eat some sweet potatoes and some starchy vegetables and some fruits. So it's great news, right? For people. So, but a little more about the ratio of these fats have never been like what we have today. So the Tocolau and Succinate, they were around, it was like 1 to 3%. So of all the native cultures we looked at previously, and you can do estimates on a long time ago, you can look at modern people, you can find all of it kind of converges around these people only had 1 to 3% of their diet from these omega-6s, okay, the linoleic acid. And
because you can't cut omega-6s out completely. There needs to be a balance between 3s and 6s, but the problem is the average American is eating 20 omega-6s for every 1 omega-3.
Exactly. And so this has never been the case, or even some people are into the idea of cutting all the PUFA, like lowering all PUFAs in general. I don't think it's a problem to eat fish, whole fish, but maybe it's like you don't want to drink a whole bunch of what do they have, like krill oil or different things, because those could be oxidized as well. If you're trying to get like not salmon oil, what do people take? The omega-3 supplements,
fish oil.
Yeah, fish oil. That's, I guess, just fish.
Like tuna omega oil as well.
Fish, maybe that's not so great. That's what the new thing I'm thinking about is. So yes, the ratio matters, omega-6, omega-3, but also maybe we shouldn't just be isolating these things and trying to take supplements anyway, because you isolate out the vitamin E that naturally comes with fish if you eat a whole fish, and that is a good antioxidant that kind of balances what could oxidize in omega-3 oil. So anyway, we pretty much no population, I don't think any I've ever heard of. I think people try to look and there hasn't been one found that had a high ratio or a high amount of the omega-6s or PUFAs in general, right? That these people could eat high carb diets and be fine because they were not eating the processed oils.
Right. Yeah. So what are some common tips people can use? Obviously, everybody knows to avoid fast food, but what other foods, sneaky foods, are in people's diets that could be causing inflammation?
Yeah, I think some people get halfway there, right? Because they'll cut out fast food or they'll cut out certain things, but then maybe they're keto, and then they're eating all kinds of keto treats and all kinds of things. And on both sides, on the fat side or the carb side, they could be screwing themselves because something can be keto approved or something, but have a whole bunch of different things, all the additives. They could have grains in them still, that could be the oils, weird oils,
could be trans fat.
It's hard. I mean, there's still trans fats in food still, and they're just in small amounts, and they maybe don't have to list them or something like that. So
I like to call that instead of keto, they call that doing Cheeto.
Cheeto. Exactly. Yeah. And I see it not work for people, right? I mean, initially that kind of works because they're getting on the right page kind of, and then it doesn't, right? And then a lot of people stall out or this and that. So really, I like to say, we talked about counting protein and nutrients instead of calories. I think a good proxy for that is also counting ingredients instead of calories. Yeah. Right. If you focus on just, okay, well, today I'm not going to eat foods that have ingredient labels, or, you know what I mean? If it has ingredient lists, that's just bad.
Yeah. If you follow that, it's hard to go wrong.
It's hard to go wrong. Absolutely. And so you should be counting ingredients, or it's like, okay, well, I don't know. Yeah, there's like a Greek yogurt. Well, usually they only have one ingredient. So, but there's certain things that can be in packages that are still fine. And also people don't really understand what I'm saying. They're like, oh, so I can't like cook something because it has 5 ingredients. Like, no, you put together those 5 ingredients. That doesn't count as ingredients. I'm
Right.
definitely not talking about you making a stir fry with
Oh my gosh,
5 different
come on.
ingredients. Yeah. But yeah, if you default to use things without ingredient lists, that's the way to go. That's how people find true health. So, again, a lot of people can go on a lot of different diets, whatever it may be, paleo friendly. And yeah, you're eating a bunch of packaged foods that happen to be paleo friendly. This is not the way to go. You'll get halfway there. I get it. Yeah, it can produce results in the beginning, and then it's going to stop working, and you're probably not going to hit your goals. And it's fine. I think people need to go on these journeys. Like I didn't do this overnight, right? I didn't do it overnight. It's like now I don't even want to go out to restaurants anymore because I can cook better than restaurants. A lot of things. I cook simple meals with good quality ingredients. I think they're more delicious.
Skill. I tell all my clients that I'm coaching through weight loss, it's going to be really hard to eat healthy unless you learn how to cook on your own. Otherwise, you're just subjected to whatever's at your disposal, whatever's down the street, whatever the restaurant's serving. Cooking is almost a life hack for healthy eating.
It's the biggest life. It's the biggest thing you can do, I think, in the world. Yeah, someone asked me. Yeah, I guess that's the biggest thing that I've changed in my life and that's helped me the most is cooking my own meals. And it's delicious, man. And it's cheaper, it's better in all ways. If you go to a restaurant, you're going to get this tiny little bit of protein, right? They're going to give you the flimsiest thing because they have a budget, right?
Yep,
they have
exactly.
And they're going to fill it up with all kinds of other cheap foods, cheapy starches or cheapy whatever, plus of course cheapy oils and all this that you're not going to know about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not satisfying. I can't go out to eat. It's just not a good experience anymore.
And if you cook something at home and it sucks, so what? At least you didn't spend, $70 on it. You spent maybe $7.
Yeah, and you can get better. I love it. I perfected so many things over the years where it's like I have it dialed in. Mm-hmm. And it didn't happen day one. But if you get your methods dialed in, it's going to be so good.
Yep. Just find the right combination of spices you like, get a few menu items to rotate throughout the week. And maybe you could still go out to eat once or twice a week, just if it's just for social interaction. Sure.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, cooking, got to learn how to do it. Don't be afraid of it. Give it a try. You might suck at first. You might set the smoke alarm off. I've been there, but it'll be worth it in the end for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, man. So what are some of the problems, in your opinion, with this fake lab-grown meat?
Oh, man. Yeah. So there's different kinds. There's just the fake meat that they take a whole bunch of monocropped plant foods and put them together. Mm-hmm. And you're never going to equal nature. That's never going to be environmentally friendly. You're just using using probably just like fake statistics anyway, right? To try to say that, oh, it's better for the environment. It's not better for your health or the environment. It's a scam. And just same thing with the lab grown meats. I like to talk about like the alchemy, right? People may have heard about alchemy back in the day. They were trying to create gold out of lead. Right. It's not going to work. I think the fake meat is the new version of alchemy. It's like trying to go the speed of light. You're never going to go faster than the speed of light. Theoretically, you can approach it. You're never going to equal it with, something that's not light. You're never going to equal it or get better than it. So my very firm belief is you're never going to equal or better meat. This is an amazing thing that nature or a higher power, whatever, has created. Yeah. It like these complex processes, like we're talking about 70,000 compounds and the diverse diet that animals instinctively know how to eat. They know when to eat certain foods that are higher in magnesium when they're deficient in magnesium. They know how to even heal themselves. I've interviewed Fred Provenza, which is a very interesting guy that's been studying for animals for many decades. And they know how to eat. There's so much things going on with animals and their diets. And over millions of years, they've evolved. So and this process.
Intelligence within them.
The innate intelligence is amazing. And they provide us with this food that we evolved on. This is like what we evolved on.
This is what propulsed us to the top of the food chain. Once we
absolutely
learned how to cook and hunt and eat this meat, and our brains grew, and boom, here we are.
But and humans are the only species that think that we can eat the diet that eat a different diet than we evolved on. Right? It's insane. Like just think about it for a second. Just say, or you can think of examples in the zoo. This always happens in zoos. They try to give animals and they mimic their diet and it's not quite right. And they're like, oh, they're not having offspring. They don't mate. They failure to thrive. They die early. All these things. Whenever humans try to feed animals a different diet, it never works. And we just know, of course, yes, a lion eats meat. We know this. Right? Like you can't have a vegan cat. It's like joke. It's a big meme. It's impossible. So
trying to do it with dogs now too.
They're trying to do it with dogs and they're withering away and dying. And yeah, I mean, you can make approximations, yes, but it's never, you can like have a dog like survive on some weird, like low protein kibble, but it has a certain digestive system. Actually, so the animals that have problems are animals that humans feed, right? So it's like our pets or like, yeah, the only like even like what is it like squirrels or something like raccoons, the only other animals they get sick are the animals that eat our food. So they'll eat our garbage.
Birds too. Some birds from eating our garbage will get sick as well.
We'll get sick because they're eating our processed trash food. So yes, fake meat is a fairy tale. It's alchemy. It doesn't make any sense that even if you could make something that had, say, the simple amino acids that were about equivalent, right? Like, okay, we'll spend 20 years and we'll make it. It still doesn't have the 70,000 secondary compounds at all. So this is what Stefan van Vliet's already studying. There's like the fake meat has nowhere near the same of all these healthful, 70,000 compounds. And also, you're never, in my opinion, going to get better for the environment. Right. It doesn't quite make sense because, I mean, yes, maybe you can get better if you're talking about a feedlot because they have all these extra inputs that maybe add to the sort of green, whatever, GHG equivalent. But if you're taking a cow on grass, I don't think you can do better than the efficiency of a cow on grass. Right. Because if you have the lab grown meat, you need to have so much power and energy, refrigeration, different chemicals or antibiotics to sterilize it. There's so much stuff that goes on to grow these lab grown meats that, of course, no one is talking about. They're not advertising that you're never going to hit the nutrition the same and you're never going to hit the energy required the same. It's alchemy.
Yep. That's a good analogy. I like that. I'm going to have to steal that one from you.
Do it.
Okay. So have you done the carnivore diet?
I've done it for a couple of weeks just to try it out. I'm not a big fan because it's an intervention to me. It's great as an intervention. Right. So I'm a fan of it as an intervention, right? A temporary thing. And it helps kind of reset your gut and like get, let's do a reset type of thing. But, for me, I think this is really, it's a feather in the hat to my sapien diet. Sapien way of eating is kind of just a little bit like Weston A. Price. It's just like, what did he find that all cultures do? It's like, this is a human diet. This is just, we're just saying if you're eating whole foods properly prepared, including animal foods, that's kind of a sapien diet in a sense, right? So I was doing my version. I eat probably 80% animal foods by calories if you did the math. And then I have strategic 20% of plant foods with low anti-nutrients. Like I'm not eating a bunch of kale. Like I'm eating, stuff like sauerkraut, avocado, mushrooms, and onions and simple foods like that. And so I was eating that for a few years. And then I was like, oh, I'll try carnivore and see how I feel. Nothing changed. I did it for 2 weeks. I felt exactly the same. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I had it dialed in with my approach.
Your first run. Yeah. Because you're already pretty close to begin with.
Well, also, it took me years to get there. So, right, it took me like maybe 5 years to get to my version of the sapien diet of 80% animal foods with the key plant foods with the low anti-nutrients. Like, it's very purposeful to get to this certain thing. And so then I think that is, very ideal for at least me. And I think people would have an ideal version for them. And I think it would be very high animal foods just based on what we know about nutrition, just basic nutrition science of bioavailable complete proteins and nutrients from animal foods. And then, I don't think, yes, if there was some ideal diet, it would be carnivore. And I don't think it would be anywhere near vegan. I think if you did, you looked at the whole population, you did all these, calculations, trials, experiments, whatever it is, I think you'd come to the optimum being somewhere in that zone.
So there's a spectrum, and here you have veganism, and here you have carnivore. It's definitely the ideal is definitely going to be closer to the carnivore spectrum, but probably not all the way to that spectrum.
Exactly. And from all, yeah, I'm trying to be open, that really is my goal. Like you said in the beginning, I'm just interviewing all kinds of people. I interview people that don't agree with me. I look at this from every which way, read books every day. I'm reading a different book and trying to get a different angle on this. And this is just what I found.
Yeah. And I think all the reading probably leads you back to, again, evolution and what makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, it's a good check, at least. We're not saying it's automatically true, but it always has to check out with evolution. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good, like a check and balance system. It's a good baseline as well. Yeah. If somebody were to eat carnivore, would you recommend that they necessarily need to eat nose to tail? Do they need to eat the organs? Do they need to eat all those as well, in addition to just eating the ground beef and steaks?
Yeah, well, need is an interesting word.
Well,
right?
Will they run into deficiencies if they don't?
I think they will. Theoretically, they would. And yeah, I don't recommend simple, like some people like the ribeye carnivores, they're just like, I just eat ribeyes or just beef and eggs. Yeah, I think that's a very possible short-term thing and even 5-year thing, right? Especially if you're coming from very obese and yeah, you probably have a lot of stores of nutrients and you can get by. But I think it's a little bit like vegans where they're like, man, I feel great after, there's a honeymoon, 6 months.
Yeah,
I cut out a bunch of trash.
From the standard American diet to any diet, really, then they're going to feel better.
100%. But then it's like, okay, well, then how long do the vegans last? Sometimes they'll last a year and then they're like, oh man, I feel terrible, no energy, blah, blah. Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's good. So they go away from it. Some vegans, they could last 5 years. You hear about them. Well, maybe they do have a lot of good stores of nutrients and they can last that long, or they're supplementing enough, or something. So to put that into the carnivore perspective, yeah, there's people that have been doing it 5 years, 10 years, maybe. I just don't think that's ideal. I think they're depleting certain nutrients, or they're just going to run into a wall. And I hear a lot of problems with carnivores. No one really talks about them, but people do have problems on carnivore. They're just not as well known. And so it just makes a lot more sense evolutionarily from all just biochemistry. Any way you look at it, there's certain key things that are found more in plant foods, or that it's just a more natural balance that humans have always done to include. Like people for all of history have gone to great lengths to get plant foods. People like to talk about the Inuit and stuff as carnivores. Like, no, I mean, in the summertime, they were eating other things and other foods, and they would always go to great lengths, such as eating the contents of the stomach of animals and the green, whatever mulchy stuff in like a caribou stomach. They would eat that.
Interesting, yeah, because Inuit is commonly propped up as the example of a carnivore culture.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, they eat. There's all kinds of traditions. I even went with the Maasai and the Hadza in Africa. The Maasai, people think, oh yeah, they just drink, it's just blood and milk. That's all they eat, and meat. Like, no, I mean, they made us a stew, and then they'll put some herbs in it. It's not like they're eating salads from Whole Foods, like a whole thing like that. But they have like key kind of like herbs and stuff like that they use. Even, well, mostly the men are just do the blood, milk, and meat only for a certain part of their life anyway. But yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I know you spent some time with Dr. Paul Saladino and Dr. Baker. I know Dr. Paul, he's introducing some fruits. Are you aware of Dr. Baker? Is he supplementing, or is he eating nose to tail, or is he just pretty much?
Oh, interesting. So yeah, Paul's interesting because he's always been 100% on board with nose to tail. He's eating all kinds of organ meats, and he's like going to great lengths to get a lot of the thymus and all kinds of stuff into his diet to make sure he's getting the full nutrients. And yes, he definitely is more on this train of fruits and certain low anti-nutrient plant foods that he finds works better. So yeah, I've been friends with Paul for a long time. Same thing with Sean Baker, Dr. Sean. I actually don't know. I haven't talked to him recently. I think I'm going to talk to him again soon, but I don't think he's super dogmatic or strict about eating some plant foods once in a while, or, you know what I mean? He'll like, oh yeah, I use this like low sugar ketchup, or like, he just isn't like that, but he just doesn't think we need to eat organs. And I've had debates with actually Paul and Sean and Mark Sisson. We had a debate live once, and the whole idea was to talk about that. And Baker's just like, yeah, I don't think we need them. And that's what I'm saying. Need is an interesting term because, yeah, I mean, we know what's in liver. We know there's like tons of like hard to get nutrients like copper. That's a great example of like copper or like folate or something. Like copper is just a good example. I think a lot of people are deficient in copper, and it actually is a very needed nutrient, especially for just dealing with iron. And a lot of people might have a out of balance iron to copper ratio. And if you eat more copper, things can improve. Or even the methionine to glycine ratio. It's like there's been studies like plant-based advocates will say, oh, look, there's rat study, these people, they ate all this meat and they died earlier. Like, no, they were eating a very high methionine diet that was just all muscle meat. But when they gave these mice or rats glycine, which is from the collagen, they lived just as long. There's no problem. So the idea is that, yeah, humans always ate nose to tail. We ate the fatty bits and the gristly bits and the bone marrow and the, tendons. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of good evidence that shows that we want to eat nose to tail, and we have, and that it does provide these smaller things. Like we're talking about pretty nuanced things here with the, glycine to methionine ratio.
Even copper is not something that I run across very often in terms of what we're deficient in. Copper, you mentioned liver has it. Where else can we get copper?
Other mollusks, any kind of shellfish. Man, I don't remember off the top of my head. Zinc and copper are good. Zinc, oysters have a good amount of copper, and they have a good amount of zinc. Mm-hmm. Pretty much all these foods that people have been eating for all of history that are these nutrient dense foods, they have these hard to get nutrients like zinc and copper, which a lot of people are deficient in.
Yeah. And again, back to the bioavailability, there may be some of these levels of zinc in plant foods, but sometimes in plant foods those nutrients are locked in, and our digestive systems can't necessarily unlock them, which is another component. And again, another reason why we talked about, even when you go to paleo and you cut things out, you can do good for a time, but you'll hit a wall. It's just another reason why it's just so hard to be healthy in this country, which comes us back to our original point, which led you here, which was, the normalization of degeneration and old age and sore knees and acid reflux. It's just, there's a million and one reasons why it's hard to be healthy in this country.
Yeah, everything's working against you. And this is a social aspect too. It's like you're the wacky one if you don't want to eat processed foods. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I agree. I don't think what is it? It's not, it's difficult. I don't know how to phrase it. It's straightforward. It's not easy, but there is a straightforward path, right? So it's just not. Yeah, it's hard to say.
It's simple in its concept. It's just difficult in execution.
But what I'd like to promote to people is that it can be very doable and delicious and enjoyable and all these things once you go on this journey. And yes, you learn about foods, how to cook them. If you do it, man, I don't feel restricted at all. This is one of my big theories too. If you're on some kind of like willpower type of restriction type of plan, it will never work. Mm-mm. It's doomed from the start. It makes no sense. But the thing is, I'm not restricted. I feel zero restriction. I'm eating the most delicious meals. I look forward to every meal. I am fist pumping. I'm eating the most delicious meals. Look at my Instagram. They're amazing. Everyone's like, wow, they look so good. I'm like, yeah, I'm getting healthier by eating this.
Yeah. And they can have that too if you just learn to cook.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody's going to stick to a diet if it's not affordable, it's not convenient, and doesn't taste good.
Yep. No, yep. And you can do that. Just know that it's possible to do that in a healthy way. Yeah.
All right. So to wrap things up here, how would you describe the ideal sapien diet?
Yeah. So animal-based, I'd say. So not plant-based. I'd say avoid as many processed foods as you can. So anything with an ingredient list, as much as possible. I get it. You're not always going to do it. You can have taco night, but yeah, let's look for some better shells that don't have, you can find some gluten-free, like only few ingredients. Or actually, corn
tortillas, for example, like are better than the flour tortillas.
Yes. And especially if they're not made with seed oils, though, you got to watch out. If you can find a corn tortilla that's made with lard, which is what it traditionally was made with, that'd be great. That'd be fine. And I was just going to say at the farmers market, they do have this great place that they do really good meat, quality meat, and they have their tortillas are made of cassava flour and lard, and that's all they have in them. There's these two ingredients. Throw a little baking soda in there, they told me, but yeah, it's just that's fine. So you can find ways around it. So yes, so watch out for ingredients lists. Focus on the whole foods. Focus on the animal proteins and fats. Yeah, avoid anything with the sugar, the excess sugar, flour, and seed oils. I mean, it's that simple, right? It's like, and yes, and then to go to the next level would be focus on maybe plant foods that have fewer anti-nutrients. And, you'd have to look that up. But I mean, a lot of like things like spinach and kale have a whole bunch of oxalates and they will bind with, you're not actually getting the iron in spinach, or you're not getting the like protein or,
right.
Yeah.
Because like I mentioned earlier, they're kind of locked in there.
Yes.
Nutrients. Yeah. Carrots, I heard, are also pretty high in oxalates as well. But yeah, like you said, the sapien diet doesn't need to be restrictive. It's just avoiding a few things. And again, I said time and time again, eating in line with our evolutionary biology as close as we can.
Absolutely. Yeah. My like kind of easy way to explain it, just lean into the animal foods while avoiding the processed foods. Or a simple thing is like, whatever diet you're eating now, what if you just double the protein and then just like kind of like, now we have less room for the processed food. So if you replace the most processed part of your diet, right? It's like, oh man, I love bread. Okay, we'll cut out the bread and we'll replace it with more meat, more eggs, whatever. Just kind of like that shift is gigantic. If you do that shift for a number of months, or years, you will be a different person. And that's what happened to me. So what happens to people around me, happens who we work with Dr. Gary and the clients and patients we work with, life-changing.
Yep. Yeah. A practical application for that sparked my memory was I had a weight loss client who pretty much all we did was every morning he was having 2 eggs, 2 slices of toast. I said, okay, just have 2 more eggs, get rid of the toast. I think that
exactly it
caused him to drop like 25 pounds in like 3 months.
Nailed it. That's a perfect example.
All right, Brian. So when can we look forward to this Food Lies documentary coming out?
Oh man, it's taking a while. My editor it's kind of on his shoulders, and and we're all working for free. We have raised money on Indiegogo, and people can still support the film at foodlies.org. And maybe if we get some big money, we almost had a big donor actually, we could get it done faster. But we're working as fast as possible. We have meetings every single day, and we work on it every day. And it's going to be next year when it comes out. But I think we'll be getting on Netflix and worldwide because we have a great distribution company. Yes, that is behind us. And yes, I have big hopes to get it everywhere.
Awesome. So we could follow you at Food Lies on Instagram. Check out the podcast, PQ Podcasts, sapien.org, nosetail.org. Anything else you want to talk about, man? Anywhere else we could follow you? How else can we support you?
No, that's it. Yeah, you can just go to those places. Yeah, I think really I just try to get stuff out on Instagram a lot. And the podcast and Instagram is a great place. I don't do a lot of like advertising or anything. It's just like I just put out my ideas and content, and follow me there.
Love it, man. Hey, Brian, thanks a lot, buddy. I really appreciate you joining me. That's going to be a lot of good content in there for all my patients and listeners. Can't thank you enough. It's been a real pleasure having you, man.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.